Before we start, don't forget to hit subscribe, drop a comment, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear is one of the most unbelievable miscarriages of justice in modern America. It was a cold November night in 1999 when the small town of Hollow Creek, Kentucky, changed forever. The streets were slick with rain, the kind that blurred the reflection of every streetlight and made the asphalt look like liquid glass. At 11:47 p.m., a panicked 911 call came from a quiet cul-de-sac on Maple Ridge Lane. The voice was trembling, a woman gasping for air, saying only 4 words before the line went dead. "He's in the house." By the time police arrived, the door to the 2-story home of Clara and Michael Denton was open wide. Clara Denton, a respected school teacher, was found lifeless in the kitchen, blunt force trauma to the head. Her husband, Michael, was gone. So was her car. For the Hollow Creek Police Department, it seemed like an open and shut case. The missing husband, the dead wife, the broken marriage everyone in town whispered about. Within 48 hours, they found Michael Denton, disoriented, barefoot, and covered in his wife's blood, walking along a desolate county road 10 miles away. He swore he didn't remember what happened, said he blacked out, said he loved his wife. The police didn't believe a word. Michael was charged with first-degree murder within the week. The trial moved fast, too fast. The prosecution painted him as a jealous, abusive husband who snapped when Clara threatened to leave him. They had circumstantial evidence: blood-stained gloves found in his truck, a neighbor claiming to have heard an argument, a fingerprint on the murder weapon, a brass fireplace poker. But what they didn't have was motive, or DNA, or time. Michael's public defender, James Kellar, begged for more investigation, but the county wanted closure. The jury took less than 3 hours to deliver the verdict: guilty, life in prison without parole. And just like that, a man who swore he was innocent vanished behind the gray walls of Redwater Correctional Facility, a forgotten name in an overcrowded system. 20 years passed. Michael became a ghost, his story buried under newer crimes, newer headlines, newer tragedies. Inside, he kept a single photograph of Clara, folded and worn from years of touch. Every night, he whispered the same words: "I didn't kill you." Then, in the fall of 2019, something unexpected happened. A young investigative journalist, Rebecca Lang, working for a small digital news outlet called The Ledger Project, stumbled upon the Denton case while researching wrongful convictions. She noticed something odd. The forensic evidence report from 1999 mentioned unknown DNA traces under Clara's fingernails that were never identified. Back then, DNA databases were still new, but now, with modern forensic tech, those samples could be retested. Rebecca reached out to the state crime lab requesting a review. It took months, long, silent months, but she finally got a call from a technician named Eric Sloan. "You might want to sit down," he said. The DNA under her fingernails doesn't match Michael Denton. It matches someone else. That someone was Ryan Mendez, a man who used to do odd jobs around the Denton's neighborhood. Ryan had a record for burglary and assault. He'd been in and out of jail, but here was the problem. Ryan Mendez died in 2007 in a car accident. If this was true, Michael Denton had spent 20 years in prison for another man's crime. Rebecca pushed the story public. Within days, it exploded online. #FreeMichaelDenton trended on Twitter. Podcasters, activists, even former prosecutors began demanding a retrial. But not everyone wanted the truth out. The lead detective from 1999, Harold Whitaker, now retired, refused to comment. When Rebecca tracked him down, he told her, "That case was closed for a reason. You dig too deep, and you'll find things better left buried." 2 days later,
her car was broken into. Her laptop, containing all her case notes, was gone. Meanwhile, inside Redwater, Michael was called to the warden's office for the first time in years. A stranger in a suit stood waiting. Attorney Daniel Crow, a former federal prosecutor turned wrongful conviction advocate. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside were printouts, Rebecca's article, the DNA report, and a motion for retrial. For the first time in 20 years, Michael felt something he thought was gone forever: hope. But something didn't sit right. If Mendez killed Clara, why was the case against Michael so airtight? Who planted the gloves, the fingerprints? Someone had gone to great lengths to make him look guilty, and that someone might still be alive. As Rebecca prepared to publish her follow-up story, she got a tip from an anonymous email address. "You're looking in the wrong direction. Check who handled the evidence after the arrest." Attached was a single photo, an evidence bag marked with the initials H.W. Detective Harold Whitaker. Rebecca's heart sunk. If this was real, the same man who built the case against Michael might have planted the evidence himself. She drove to Whitaker's home that night. Rain pounding, headlights off, her recorder running. But when she reached his house, the front door was ajar. A police scanner crackled from inside. And there, on the living room floor, Whitaker was dead. Detective Harold Whitaker had been dead for less than an hour when police cars surrounded his small suburban home. Rebecca Lang stood on the edge of the property, rain dripping from her hair, her hands trembling around her camera. She told the responding officers she found the door open, walked in, and saw the body. No one believed her.
Whitaker's death was ruled a self-inflicted gunshot wound within 24 hours. The official report said suicide, but Rebecca had been inside long enough to notice the details: the overturned coffee table, the missing service pistol, the blood spatter that didn't match the gun's position. This wasn't suicide. Someone wanted it to look that way. The next morning, Michael Denton sat in the Redwater prison library, staring at the flickering TV tuned to local news. Whitaker's death dominated every headline. Reporters hinted it was connected to renewed scrutiny of an old murder case. Michael's stomach dropped. He knew, deep down, that his freedom came with a price. Someone was tying up loose ends. He wrote a letter to Rebecca through Daniel Crow's legal office, scribbling in shaky handwriting. "If they killed him, they'll come for you next. Be careful." Meanwhile, Crow was working around the clock. He filed an appeal for Michael's conviction with the Kentucky Supreme Court, backed by new DNA evidence and testimony from forensic experts who tore apart the 1999 investigation. Crow uncovered that Whitaker had been the sole evidence handler for multiple cases during that era, several of which had lost or compromised evidence. But what made this one different was motive. In old department records, Crow found a connection that chilled him. Whitaker and Clara Denton, the victim, had known each other. Years earlier, she had filed a complaint against him for unprofessional conduct while he was investigating a domestic assault near her school. The file vanished from the department archives. If Whitaker had a grudge, framing Michael Denton could have been his twisted form of revenge or silence. Rebecca couldn't let it go. The deeper she dug, the more tangled it became. Her next stop was the Hollow Creek Evidence Storage Facility, a crumbling brick building that still smelled like dust and bleach from the late 90s. She requested access to the original evidence files. The clerk hesitated, saying the case was closed, but when she dropped Whitaker's name, his expression changed. He handed her a box labeled Denton 994A. Inside were photos, transcripts, and an evidence log that didn't make sense. The log listed 2 pairs of gloves, one found in Michael's truck, another found near the scene. Only one pair was ever presented in court. And next to the missing pair, the signature HW appeared again, signed out, but never checked back in. Rebecca snapped photos of the log, tucked the files back, and hurried out. As she reached her car, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Engine running, no headlights. When she looked again, it was gone. Later that night, Daniel Crow received an unmarked envelope at his office. Inside, a single Polaroid photo. It showed Rebecca standing in front of Whitaker's house moments before the police arrived that night. Someone was watching her, and someone wanted to make it look like she was part of the problem. He called her immediately. "Rebecca, listen to me. You need to go somewhere safe. They're trying to set you up." Her voice cracked. "Who are they, Daniel?" There was a pause. "I think it's someone still inside the department." Meanwhile, back in Redwater, Michael received unexpected news. He was being transferred to a different facility for security reasons. 2 guards arrived at dawn, both unfamiliar faces. When Michael asked where they were taking him, one replied, "State orders." But as they pulled onto the rural highway, something felt off. No radio chatter, no escort vehicles, no official transport van, just an old pickup with a cage bolted in the back. 10 miles out, the driver slowed near a bridge. The second guard turned, pulled a gun from his holster, and said, "Sorry, Denton, it's time to finish this." Before he could pull the trigger, headlights blazed from the opposite direction, another car speeding toward them. It rammed into the pickup's side, sending both vehicles spinning into the guardrail. When the dust cleared, Michael crawled out, bleeding but alive. The driver was unconscious. The gunman was thrown through the windshield. The other car's door opened. Rebecca Lang stepped out, clutching a small pistol, her face pale and furious. "You were right. They tried to kill you," she said. Michael couldn't believe it. She'd followed the transfer order, realized something was wrong, and tracked them down. She got him into her car, speeding away before backup arrived. It was chaos, sirens echoing in the distance, radio chatter breaking through static. For the first time in 20 years, Michael was outside prison walls. But instead of freedom, all he felt was terror. They weren't running from justice, they were running from whoever didn't want justice found. Hours later, they stopped at a rural motel off I-65, the kind of place that smelled like cigarettes and rain. Rebecca's laptop survived the crash. She opened it, scrolling through the photos from the evidence room. That's when she noticed something strange in one of the crime scene pictures, a reflection in a kitchen window, barely visible but distinct. A man's silhouette wearing a sheriff's badge, not Whitaker, someone else. Rebecca zoomed in on the timestamp. The photo was taken after Michael Denton had already been arrested, meaning another officer had returned to the scene hours later, unlogged, unsupervised. And in the department's records from that night, only one name was missing from the duty roster: Lieutenant Gary Henson, Whitaker's partner. Rebecca looked up from the screen, eyes wide. "He's still out there," she whispered. Michael clenched his fists. Then it's time someone finally found him. But outside the motel, across the parking lot, a familiar black SUV sat idling again. This time, its headlights were on. The man in the driver's seat lifted a phone to his ear and said just 6 words. "They know. It's time to end it." The rain hadn't stopped since the crash. Rebecca Lang sat by the motel window, her laptop screen casting a pale glow over the dark room. Michael Denton hadn't slept in 2 days, pacing, restless, watching shadows move across the parking lot. That black SUV was still out there. Every few minutes, the faint red blink of its taillight pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside, Rebecca replayed the photo again and again. The reflection in the kitchen window, the badge, the posture. Lieutenant Gary Henson, Whitaker's old partner. He was the only man who could have planted the gloves, the only man who could have silenced Whitaker before he talked. Rebecca checked the latest news feed. Henson had quietly retired from Hollow Creek PD just 3 days after Whitaker's death. No press, no statement. He disappeared from public life completely. Michael still behind her. "You think he killed Clara?" Rebecca didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "No, I think he killed them both." The next morning, Daniel Crow arrived at the motel, exhausted, clutching a manila envelope. He'd tracked Henson's address through a property database, a secluded farmhouse 40 miles north near an abandoned limestone quarry. "Rebecca, You can't go there, Crow warned. If Henson did this, he's dangerous. Let me take this to the state police. Rebecca looked at Michael. They're the same people who put him away. You really think they'll listen? Crow sighed. Then we go together. By dusk, the three of them were on the road, a rusted Chevy borrowed from the motel owner, headlights cutting through the fog. The air felt thick, charged like the calm before a storm that had waited 20 years to break. They reached the farmhouse just before midnight. No lights, no movement, only the sound of wind scraping against an old tin roof. Rebecca carried a flashlight. Michael had nothing but the truth left to lose. They pushed open the creaking door. Inside, the house smelled like oil and mildew, and something else. Paper, boxes, files. Stacks of old police records littered the living room floor. Whitaker's handwriting was on half of them, Henson's initials on the rest. Rebecca knelt and flipped through the pages, evidence reports, signed confessions, photographs. Then she found it, a confidential memo dated November 10th, 1999. It read,
Witness protection request denied. Subject, CD fears reprisal from LTGH. CD, Clara Denton. Rebecca's heart dropped. Clara had tried to report Henson before she died. He threatened her, and when she refused to stay quiet, he killed her. And Whitaker had helped him cover it up, at least until his conscience caught up 2 decades later. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked upstairs. Crow motioned for silence. They heard slow, deliberate footsteps descending. Rebecca turned off the flashlight. Total darkness. A beam of light sliced through the hallway. A man's voice, hoarse and steady, broke the silence. I was wondering when you'd come. Gary Henson stood at the bottom of the stairs, revolver in hand. His face was older, worn, but his eyes still carried that same cold authority. You shouldn't have opened this, he said, stepping forward. You think you found the truth? You don't know what it cost to keep this town safe. Michael stepped out from the shadows. You call framing me safe? You call murdering my wife justice? Henson didn't flinch. She was going to ruin me. Whitaker tried to talk me out of it until he grew a conscience. Rebecca's voice trembled. You killed him too. Henson smiled faintly. He made me. I had no choice. He raised the gun toward Michael. But you were the perfect scapegoat. A drunk, a husband with a temper. The public wanted a monster, and I gave him one. A gunshot split the air. Rebecca screamed. Henson staggered, clutching his shoulder. Crow stood behind him, smoke curling from his pistol. Put it down, Gary. It's over. But Henson laughed, a low, ragged sound. You really think anyone's gonna believe you? Every file, every piece of proof, it's here, and it dies with me. He lunged for a gas can by the wall, kicking it over. The smell of gasoline filled the room. Then, a lighter. The flame caught fast. Rebecca grabbed the files. Michael pulled her toward the door. Crow tackled Henson, the two crashing against the burning shelves. The house exploded into chaos, wood cracking, smoke choking every breath.
Rebecca stumbled out onto the dirt road, coughing, dragging Michael behind her. Behind them, the farmhouse burned like the night itself was being consumed. Crow emerged seconds later, blood on his arm, but Henson was gone. Did you? Rebecca began. Crow shook his head. No, he didn't make it. They watched the flames climb higher, devouring 20 years of lies. All the proof, all the pain, gone. Or so they thought. Weeks later, Michael stood before the Kentucky Supreme Court. With the DNA evidence, the timeline inconsistencies, and Rebecca's recordings of Henson's confession, the court overturned his conviction. After 20 years behind bars, Michael Denton walked out a free man. The press called it a victory for truth, but for him, it didn't feel like victory, just survival. Rebecca's story broke nationwide. The Ledger Project became a symbol for independent justice. She won awards, Michael got freedom, but the scars stayed. Then, 3 months later, she got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, burnt around the edges. It was the farmhouse, taken at night, and in the window's reflection, a man standing outside, watching. She turned it over. Written in black ink were just 3 words: "You missed one." That night, in a quiet corner of Hollow Creek, an elderly man walked into a dive bar off Route 17. He ordered whiskey. His left arm was covered in burns, and as he lifted the glass, a sheriff's badge glinted beneath his sleeve. If you thought this story was over, you're wrong, because in Hollow Creek, justice never really ends. And if you think this case was intense, you're not ready for what's coming next. Hit subscribe, because the next story might just change everything you believe about justice in America.